Hi, this is Bharti, and we are here at KubeCon and CloudNativeCon in Barcelona, Spain. And today we have with us once again Gabe Monroy. So, what are the hottest things that you're going to announce here?
Well, so there's one announcement in particular I think is pretty important. This is an announcement called a Service Mesh Interface. So what Service Mesh Interface is it's a new interoperability layer that provides sort of access to lots of different service mesh technologies. Examples include Istio, Console from HashiCorp, Linkerd, which is a CNCF project. And what SMI does is it just makes it easier for companies to adopt service mesh by sort of bringing a basic feature set that all the different meshes can agree. And so I'm really excited that we've lined up really impressive list of launch partners, including companies like Red Hat and VMware and Buoyant and HashiCorp and Solo and lots of folks to help support this effort to really bring service mesh technology to more people. So if you think about where service mesh technology came from, the way that we've been doing network design for the last 25 years was this idea of smart endpoints and dumb pipes. And the idea there is that the networks just exist to forward packets, right? It's just sort of a packet forwarding device. And any logic for things like encryption or compression or anything interesting that's happening on the network is supposed to be offloaded to the different endpoints in the network. That's gotten us pretty far, right, in the industry. It's worked out pretty well. The challenge is with Kubernetes and the explosion of microservices and containers, we now have so many different endpoints that we have to manage that logic across them. And so engineering teams are starting to struggle with how to keep, monitor and manage like all these different endpoints that are exploding. And so service mesh technology kind of changes the game a bit by saying like, look, we're going to actually move some of the logic for things like how you do policy, how you do routing, how you do compression, how you do, lots of different things you need to do to configure a network, push that into a separate set of control plane APIs. And that is what a service mesh is. Now, of course, the challenge today, and the reason why SMI is so meaningful is right now, if you want to adopt this technology, you have to build an integration directly with something like Istio or something like Linkerd. And the challenge is you lose flexibility at that point. You can't actually move between the different meshes, each of which offer different strengths and weaknesses. So SMI provides a new abstraction layer that allows you to integrate once with SMI, and then you get the benefit of the entire ecosystem.
And what other, beyond, this interface, what else was announced?
Well, I'm really excited about what we're announcing with Helm 3. So Helm 3, for those of you who don't know Helm is the package manager for Kubernetes. It is a CNCF project. In fact, according to the last CNCF survey, 68% of Kubernetes users are using Helm to manage their package deployments. Helm 3 is interesting and exciting because it represents a fresh re-engineering of the system to adapt with what Kubernetes is doing these days around RBAC policies and sort of a more modern approach to sort of the security posture of the project. It also actually supports OCI compatible image stores for chart storage. So that means you can build Helm charts, but you can push and pull them from Docker registries the way you would any other Docker image. So a lot of exciting stuff there.
And what is new in Helm 3?
In a lot of ways, we didn't want to add a ton new besides some things like the OCI image format. I like to think if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And so, besides making some changes to the security model, removing Tiller and a couple other components, it's really just the same Helm experience that folks know and love today.
And I think the third major announcement is virtual kubelet.
Yes, virtual kubelet is reaching a 1.0, and this one's exciting because I think customers have really fallen in love with the idea of serverless Kubernetes. The idea that you could run Kubernetes, orchestrate workloads using a portable API, but not have to deal with any server management in that at all. So, Virtual Kubelet is the open source project that enables this, that makes it possible. And I'm really proud to have worked with companies like Amazon and Alibaba, VMware, and others to make that technology possible in open source. We did actually build a product integration of this with AKS, with the AKS Virtual Nodes product. So if you want to go use sort of Virtual Kubelet in a production form factor, you can do that on Azure today. But that's all made possible by the 1.0 of the open source Virtual Kubelet project.
I mean, when we look at the Kubernetes space, from where it came from and where everybody's using it today, what are the kind of unique challenges that you? Because when I talk to a lot of people, they say it's very hard to use. Yeah. Kubernetes still use the waterfall kind of model, instead of the model you propose, contain, right? So what are the challenges that you come across that customers or users are seeing, and then you still feel, hey, this is still a problem that we as a community have to solve?
Yeah, and I go back to this point about how you're now seeing these mainstream enterprise companies walking up to Kubernetes and containers and looking for Microsoft to provide them guidance. And the biggest challenge that we see is that oftentimes technologies like Kubernetes are viewed from a technology first perspective. But in actuality, a lot of the problems are organizational and have to do with people, which is how do you structure an organization? How do you embrace things like DevOps and different types of culture change inside your organization to allow it to have streamlined operations? How do you reinvent the IT operations function inside your enterprise? In a lot of ways, Kubernetes and containers forces these problems up to the surface. And so providing companies guidance on how to do just the basics around digital transformation is probably the biggest blocker to adoption today. Another way of saying that is the technology is really good, right? We've kind of nailed it on the technology side. Yes, there's always things we can do to improve, but largely now this is becoming how do we get large enterprises, big governmental institutions, folks who can really benefit from this technology. How do we get the organization into a place where they can succeed? And I think that starts to get into developer tooling and prescriptive guidance around how to be enterprise grade, so that the cluster that you install, it meets the needs of enterprises from the get-go. So those are the things we're focused on at Azure.
I mean, Microsoft, you guys are known for good documentation, and at the same time, you also go out and help, customers with, or users, with education. So, are you running any sort of program to help the people problem?
Absolutely. One of the things I love working about Microsoft is we have this field, this technical field, and these are folks who are spread out across the globe, and their job is to just go in depth with customers, make sure that they have a deep understanding of the customer's problems, and that they're taking all of the different products and services that we have at Microsoft and applying them to the customer's challenges. And so those folks are deeply involved in these problems around digital transformation. And so I think the real opportunity lies in making sure that we can get that guidance down to the Microsoft field, who then can help customers, particularly around how to do cloud native adoption inside of the modern enterprise. I think that's an area that we're making some strides, but there's still some room for improvement there.
Right. I'll talk about the open source angle now, because you came from open source background. You founded the company and everything is created. Last week, or maybe before that, we saw Microsoft and Red Hat on the same, CEO of two companies at the same stage. I remember an anecdote from Jim Whitehurst where he said, 2 years ago he stole a pen from Satya's office as a souvenir, and now I'm sure Satya may have stolen something from his office. So how do you see this dramatic, change within the company, and how do you feel, being part of that, change, and I would call it revolution going within Microsoft?
It's fascinating because, as you said, like my background is all open source, right? Like I've been doing this for years. I frankly don't know another way of operating. And inside of Azure, I'd actually say the same is true, right? Like the teams inside of Microsoft, like we just do open source as part of our day-to-day jobs. We don't even think twice about it. It's natural, right? But I do still think that when you leave Microsoft and you sort of go out into other parts of the world, there is still folks who don't understand or are still starting to learn sort of this transformation that's happening. But I feel like at the end of the day, what matters is actions and not words. And I think that if you judge Microsoft by what we've been doing recently, whether it's around GitHub or whether it's around some of the stuff that we're open sourcing from the Azure team, some of the stuff in my team, what we're doing in Kubernetes, for example, I think you can start to see a company that's really valuing giving back to the community in a very meaningful way. My belief is that in order to build successful products that our cloud customers are going to want to buy, we have to actually give back in these open source communities. So it's something that we prioritize highly.
With WSL2, Linux is going to like 95% of the market. So if I think people talk about the era of desktop Linux, And I think that will happen with Windows
Yeah,
10.
Microsoft brings, Microsoft brings out the year of Linux on the desktop.
Yeah,
Finally,
yeah, because like the kernel is baked into there, so that's going to be incredible. So I'm just fascinated and excited, because we're living in a time we never expected. It's like crazy. So much is happening. It's just to be, lucky to be in this industry.
Yeah, well, I think that it's important to remember that Microsoft has been a developer company from its inception. And today, developers are increasingly building software in the cloud that targets Linux. And so making sure that we can bring that Linux environment to developers, working on Windows Workstation so that they can actually make sure that their code can compile and run on a Linux kernel. It's actually pretty critical to being able to deliver software in the modern world. So I really look at this as more of a pragmatic thing in terms of meeting developers where they are than anything else.
So once again, Gabe, for talking to me today, and I look forward to seeing you again at the next conference. Thank you.
Likewise, thanks for having me.